Hi, welcome back. This is GN Inspire, where we share all things education, career, and personal development. In today's episode, I'll share with you guys 5 tips that I learned going through her PhD. I did my PhD at the University of Oxford from October of 2015, and I defended it in December of 2019. And if I was to go back to start my PhD, I think I'll do my PhD in 1 year or maybe 2 years maximum. And mostly because I know so much now, or going through the journey, I learned so much that if I was to go back and redo my PhD, I'll leverage some of these tips. I'll use some of these hacks and strategies to help me get to the finish line faster, or at least to make the PhD journey a little bit smoother. In today's episode, I'll share only 5 tips. If you want to hear more of these tips and strategies, you can get this book, The PhD Journey, a book that I wrote, collecting all my stories, all these tips and strategies that, looking back, I think they helped me. And I also collected stories from my colleagues. So consider getting it if you are thinking of a PhD or if you're already in a PhD program. So let's go into 5 tips that I'll share today. So the first one is sharpen your axe. I think this is really important, especially in your early stages of your PhD. Think of the first 6 months or even the first year of your PhD. There is this temptation to dive into the PhD and start researching immediately, like on day one. So I know PhD programs, they do differ. Some PhD programs will require you to have a master's already, and so going through master's program will give you kind of some ideas or some research ideas or some preparation into your PhD. Some PhD programs will require you to attend compulsory class or compulsory coursework where you do exams and you get some credits. In my case, my PhD was purely research oriented, and day one I was a research student. And there was this temptation, and I think mostly because my colleagues were better off. They had some research experience, and I felt like they were giving me so much pressure. I went to the lab, and people are talking about setting up experimental rigs and all these computer simulations. Some of these softwares I didn't have experience. I didn't have prior experience using them, and I felt so much pressure. We'll talk about feeling like imposter in a few minutes, but I wish I had taken some time off, maybe the first 3 months, just to understand what is this research about, understand what kind of skills will I need, what kind of software will I need later on or during my PhD, and then take time to pause and actually learn that software, learn that skill, attend that class, coursework. While in my case, classes were not required, my advisor encouraged me to attend some classes, which I did, and they were super, super helpful. So in your first year, especially if you're doing research heavy, or like from day one you are a research student, a PhD student, I would encourage you to take some time intentionally to understand what kind of software, what kind of skill will you need, and then try and get those skills or learn that software. There is this quote that I like, and the quote goes, "Give me 6 hours to chop down a tree, and I'll spend the first 4 sharpening the axe." So take the first few months or few weeks in your PhD to intentionally sharpen your axe before you go to the real action of chopping down the tree. Number 2, be okay feeling like an imposter. I felt like an imposter, especially in my early stages of my PhD. I came from a bachelor's degree. I've explained before in another video, how I got into a PhD program at Oxford directly from my bachelor's degree. But then the first few months, I think I was starting to regret why did I jump from bachelor's to PhD, because I didn't have research experience, and things were so new and overwhelming. At some point, I was contemplating quitting or pausing it because it was just too much. I felt like an imposter. And it did not help that in my lab, we were in a lab of, I don't know how many students, maybe 30 or 20 something students. We were only a few female students. I think we were 2 or 3 female students. I was the only black woman in my lab for, I think, 3 years. The next time I saw another black woman was towards the end of my PhD. And you will never understand. You will never understand this feeling of feeling like an imposter or an outsider, or just so self-aware. When you are a minority in a group, you will never understand until you've been a minority in a group, be it in gender, religion, whatever. There is so much pressure to represent the entire tribe. Like I had so much pressure to represent the entire Black women tribe, or represent the entire continent of Africa, because I think I was the only one from a university in Africa in my lab. And so there was so much burden. And I know if you've been a minority in a group, you will understand. And so feeling like an imposter, it already happens almost naturally as a PhD student, but then it's heightened when you are a minority in the whatever group you are in. I felt like an imposter so many times in my research. And when I look back, I feel bad because I think I lost so many chances and so many opportunities. Literally, we used to have seminars, and occasionally there would be call for presentation, and they would ask any PhD student to present their research. And I hesitated so much because I felt like, oh my goodness, I don't think I belong here. I don't look prepared. And I passed so many chances to present my research in the lab because I felt like I did not know enough, or rather like, yeah, I didn't look like a PhD student. I didn't sound like a PhD student. I felt like I was not doing enough. And so I just said no to so many opportunities to present my research in the lab or to represent my lab in a conference because I felt like an imposter. So if I was to go back to my first year of PhD, I would just put up my hand anyway. I would just present whatever I know. I lost so many opportunities, so I hope you will know. So I'm sharing this so that you don't lose those opportunities. Make baby steps, keep moving forward, regardless of imposter syndrome and regardless of fear. Especially at the earlier stages of your PhD, you will feel like you don't know what you're doing. It's okay, attend that conference, present that paper anyway. Keep moving forward, regardless of imposter syndrome. And I hope when you're feeling like an imposter, if you're feeling like an imposter, and I know some people don't feel, they just feel like they belong and they feel like they know what they're doing. But just an encouragement for anyone feeling like an imposter, I hope you also realize that there are these 4 stages of learning according to Abraham Maslow. And I really loved it because he outlines like when you start in a project, you are unaware that you don't know. And then you start researching, and then slowly you realize, oh my goodness, people have done so much in this field. They've added so much knowledge in the field. What am I doing here? What am I adding? And then you feel so insecure. He calls it phase of conscious incompetence. You are well aware. You are very sure that you are incompetent. And that realization just injects a great deal of insecurity and self-doubt into your system. So I hope you realize that it's not really you. There is nothing wrong with you. It's just how learning process is like. It's just how PhD is like. You start not knowing, and then you dig deeper, you feel insecure, you feel like, oh my God, people have done so much in this field. And then slowly you add to that field, and then you become an expert later on. Number 3, be kind to yourself. Goodness. If I was to go back, I'll celebrate even little milestones. Towards the end of my PhD, I learned this way of approaching my work. I would literally just write a simple, you will get it from the PhD journey book. I added there a simple to-do list where I used to write to-do list for that week. And I would not do anything else outside that list. And the moment I finish all the to-do list on that week, I would celebrate myself. I would just do something nice. I would just take time off lab and go watch a movie or do whatever, because I've done whatever was needed according to me to be done in that week. So It's important that you be kind to yourself, because the journey is a bit lonely and it's a roller coaster. Assignments, experiments, papers will be rejected, experiments will not work, field work will not make sense, data will not make sense, or will be irrelevant, and you have to redo things. Be kind to yourself. Any small milestone, celebrate. If things fail or things don't go as you planned, it's okay. It's a PhD journey. It's just how things are, or how a big project is like. You will fail in the beginning, but you will stabilize as you go. So be kind to yourself. I look back to these key moments, and I've spoken a lot in my videos, how in 2017, I received sad news from Kenya that I had lost my brother, and I had to fly back home for his funeral. And days and weeks went by so quickly that after funeral, I was back to the UK to continue with my PhD. And I think I rushed that mourning process, because once I was back at Oxford, I was just feeling like my colleagues, like I had lost so much time. I don't know, 2 months while I was away burying and mourning my brother. My colleagues were continuing in the lab. They were writing research papers. And so when I went back to the lab, I felt like, goodness, I had lost so much time. And I felt like I needed to do a lot to catch up. And so I rushed the mourning process, something that heavy price that I came to pay later on. So anyway, if I was to go back, I think I would be a little bit kind to myself, like allowing myself time to sit down, to mourn, to feel sad, and then go back to your research later. So while you do your PhD, many things will be happening outside the PhD, good and bad. Especially when bad things happen or low moments happen outside your PhD, you are a human being. Take time, cry, take time to heal, take a break, pause, come back later, but be kind to yourself. No one else will. Number 4, set a commitment device. It's this thing that you do to commit yourself so that later on, when motivation goes down, it's difficult to go back. I think we, as human beings, we've all been here. Surely, we've been here. You tell yourself, you come back to the lab, you feel so fresh, and you're like, I'll write a paper, I'll present in this conference. You write an abstract, you submit, but then motivation to write the entire paper just disappears, right? So if you don't set PhD, especially if you have an advisor who is not so close and who doesn't give you a lot of pressure, there is a temptation to just let things roll. And if you start your research without hard deadlines and milestones, you will not be motivated to go the extra mile, especially during low motivation periods. And so I recommend that you commit yourself and write and present at least one research paper per year in a conference. Because once that abstract has been accepted for that conference, you will be motivated, or you won't have lots of options but to write the paper and present. And so you'll be forced to be on your toes to complete that paper. And also, as you write these research papers, they are kind of helping you eat your elephant. There is this phrase they say, how do you eat your elephant? So as you write these research papers, it's helping you to split your PhD into small, manageable pieces, because all these research papers, each of that research paper might actually form a chapter, a standalone chapter on their own. So as you write these research papers, your work will be so easy later on, because you can just collect all these research papers, write an introduction, and write a conclusion, and your thesis is done. Especially if you're in a university where they allow journal-type thesis, where you just collect all your research papers, peer-reviewed ones, you write an introduction, you write a conclusion, and your thesis is done. Or even if they don't allow that, you'll have solid peer-reviewed papers that you can then translate into chapters of your PhD. And your PhD thesis writing at the end would be so easy. if you've been trying to write and present this research paper. So set a commitment device. Last, PhD is not a final product. You don't need to do all the research in the world to earn a PhD. You do not need to solve all the problems in the world to earn a PhD. You just need to do enough. And your advisor will help you figure out, because enough is relative. So they will help you figure out if you've done enough. So especially for guys who are towards the end of their PhDs, every time you write a paper or you write a chapter or you do something, you give yourself 1 more week. You come back to check whatever you wrote last week or last month or last term, and there is just so much to be redone. And if you find yourself in that cycle, you will never finish, because there is always a new perspective, something new to improve on, something to edit. So as you near the end of your PhD, just know that you just need to do enough, and then your advisor will help you figure out if you've done enough. Goodness, I wasted so much time trying to make everything 110%. I'm naturally a perfectionist, and I think whatever paper I was writing, whatever experimental setup I was trying to set up or simulation I was trying to set up, I just wanted things to be perfect, and I wasted so much time. There is this unforgettable experience where I took so much time planning before setting up the experiment, right? So I set all these simulations, and I was running these simulations just to be sure that things will go well. And I think I spent, 8 months doing these simulations. This was in my early stages of PhD. Again, I don't think I had taken time to sharpen my axe, because then there is a parameter that I missed while setting up those experiments. So yes, I took 8 months, but then the simulations were missing something. And when I was writing my thesis later, trying to compare my experimental data and computational simulation data, there was something missing. And upon checking, I realized there was a parameter that I'd forgotten when I was running those simulations in my first year, because I think I rushed into it because I felt like I was idling around. My colleagues were doing simulations and setting up experiments, and I just wanted to be doing something or appear to be doing something. And so I rushed into these computer simulations, and I missed a critical parameter. Do you know I had to redo all these simulations while I was writing my thesis? Like, I had to pause writing my thesis at the end to just redo the computer simulations that I had spent 8 months in my early stages of PhD doing. And I spent less than 1 month. So 8 months of simulations, 8 months of simulations kind of condensed into 1 month, because by that time, like, I had known so much, and I had known like all these shortcuts, etc. And that's why I say, if I was to go back to my PhD, I think I'll just need 1 year or 1.5 years, and it will be all done, because you learn so much as you go along. So anyway, the point is, most of the time, even as you are paralyzed with this analysis paralysis, you are over planning, over preparing, there is a high chance that you might need to correct. And so my advice is, be it a research paper, an assignment, a chapter, experimental simulation, computer simulations, whatever you're doing, do your best. Yes, do research plan, but then don't overanalyze, otherwise you'll be paralyzed. Just try get it to 60%, then submit. Let it be checked by someone else, your advisor, and then they give you corrections. You check the corrections, you edit or correct, and then resubmit. And then that will make things way faster. Like, it will move things way faster than trying to get things 110% perfect before moving to the next step. You will waste so much time if you try to make everything perfect before making the next step. Those are 5 tips that if I was to go back to my PhD, I'll consider. If you like these tips, or if you like this kind of content, kindly consider subscribing to join our community and to stay tuned. And I'll leave a link down below on the description box where you can check out the PhD Journey book, where you get more of these tips strategies and hacks on how to go about your PhD. Thank you for watching till the end. See you in another episode. Bye for now.